Today is Monday. It is the 16th of March. This is Here First from Iowa Public Radio. I'm Michael Leland. Several interstate highways remain closed this morning after blowing snow created by a blizzard created treacherous conditions and led to several crashes. I-35 is currently closed from Ames north to Minnesota. I-80 is closed from the Jordan Creek exit in West Des Moines to the I-880 split near Minden. 80 is also shut down between Altoona and Coralville. Travel is not advised across much of Iowa this morning because of road conditions, especially once you get away from cities. New reports show two different bills aimed at reducing residential tuition at Iowa's public universities could cost the schools wildly different amounts. IPR's James Kelly reports on the ideas being proposed.
One bill that has passed in the House would allow in-state families to pay a fee during their students' first year to lock in their tuition rate for the following 3 years. It would allow families to plan for the exact cost of a 4-year degree. Another bill passed out of the House would freeze tuition increases for all resident undergraduate students over the next 5 years. A Legislative Services Agency report shows an earlier version of the bill that locks in tuition would cost Iowa's public universities just over $15 million in revenue in its third year. That was before the House added the opt-in fee. The tuition freeze would cost the school $61 million in its fifth year. Last month, the Board of Regents proposed a 3% tuition increase at the three universities, but agreed not to act until their meeting in April. I'm James Kelly, IPR News.
Iowa will get $3 million as part of a settlement with Live Nation and Ticketmaster. A major antitrust case was brought by the U.S. Justice Department and dozens of states. The lawsuit alleged the company used its dominance in concert promotion, venues, and ticket sales to limit competition and raise prices for fans and artists. The settlement caps ticket service fees at 15% and allows competing promoters to sell up to half a venue's tickets. Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird calls the agreement a win for the state. More than a dozen states say the terms don't go far enough, and they're continuing the lawsuit. The Neil Smith National Wildlife Refuge near Des Moines is making plans to continue environmental education and renovate its visitor center. IPR's Maura Curran reports that center has been closed for almost 2 years.
Educational programs at the refuge have been halted since storm damage forced the Prairie Learning Center to close in 2024. During a public open house, refuge manager Scott Gilgee said staff are reevaluating what educational programs they can offer while they plan for renovations.
As part of our process, we'll have to go back and look at your guys' comments and say, okay, is that something that is compatible with the refuge?
Gilgee explains they plan to cut the size of the learning center in half to keep costs down for staffing and operations. But they plan to offer some programs outside of the center to encourage learning opportunities on the refuge grounds. I'm Maura Curran, IPR News.
A group of food stamp recipients is suing the U.S. Agriculture Department over its efforts to prohibit the benefits from being used to buy certain non-nutritious items. Iowa Capital Dispatch reports 5 consumers enrolled in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program are suing in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Those recipients are from Iowa and 4 other states, and they're challenging the waivers in those states. President Trump's administration has so far approved waivers in 22 states. They restrict which items recipients of the Federal Food Assistance Program can buy with their benefits. The lawsuit claims that the practical effect of the waivers is to, quote, destabilize food access for every SNAP participant in the affected states. This is Here First from Iowa Public Radio. We're into the 10th week of the Iowa legislative session. Last week, lawmakers learned they could face a bigger state budget deficit, and Governor Kim Reynolds signed the second bill of the session. IPR's Megan McKinney and state government reporter Katarina Sestarek talked about what happened last week at the state capitol.
State lawmakers are once again going to have to find a way to cover the next state budget with less money. Katarina, what did revenue estimates show?
The latest revenue estimates show that the state will likely bring in even less money in tax collections than expected. State revenue has been declining because of state and federal tax cuts, and based on what we heard last week, the state will be spending nearly $1.4 billion more than it's bringing in this fiscal year that ends June 30th. State lawmakers are starting to work on the budget for next fiscal year, and once again, they'll be facing about a $1 billion budget gap. The budget proposed by Governor Kim Reynolds is $1.2 billion more than the revenue projection.
How are Republicans addressing Democrats' argument that income tax cuts have led to a fiscal death spiral?
Republican leaders say that Iowa is still in a strong financial position. They saved up about $6 billion to cover these budget gaps that they were expecting as a result of making sweeping tax cuts. And they say the tax cuts are working to keep more money in Iowans' pockets, and the state's economy will grow, and eventually tax collections will catch back up to the state budget. But Democrats point out that the budget gaps have been a lot bigger than expected. That's largely because of federal tax cuts in the Big Beautiful Bill. And Democrats are asking, when will these budget deficits end? They say Republicans need to find a way to fix the budget situation so the state's savings don't run out.
Governor Kim Reynolds signed the second bill of the session last week. How does this new law restrict local civil rights protections?
This law, which Reynolds proposed, prohibits cities and counties from having broader civil rights protections than the state. That means local governments that have anti-discrimination protections for transgender Iowans won't be able to enforce those protections anymore. And that's because Reynolds signed a law last year taking gender identity out of the Iowa Civil Rights Act.
Lawmakers heard a presentation last week about Iowa's cancer rates. What did they learn?
Well, they learned from researchers that raising taxes on tobacco would be the best thing they could do to drive down cancer rates. Iowa Cancer Registry Director Mary Charlton said that won't remove all lung cancer risks, but she said it's been shown to reduce cancer and save lives. The governor proposed raising tobacco taxes this year, but that hasn't moved forward at the State House. And Charlton also said it would be difficult for researchers to gather data on how nitrate levels in drinking water and pesticide exposure may be contributing to Iowa's high cancer rates. She said that if Iowa invested in a pesticide monitoring system, that would help the state understand how pesticides in the air may or may not affect the health of people who live near farms, for example. But Charlton says researchers will do the best they can with the data that's available as they start looking into the possible environmental drivers of Iowa's cancer rates.
Have lawmakers passed any bills related to cancer prevention this year?
Last week, the House passed a bill to require passive radon mitigation in new single- and two-family homes. That helps prevent lung cancer, but it's not clear if that bill has a path forward in the Senate.
What does this week look like at the Capitol?
The second major deadline of this session is at the end of this week. It's the second so-called funnel week. And for most bills to stay alive, they need to be approved by a committee in the opposite chamber from where they started. For example, a House bill would have to get passed by a Senate committee. And the House has passed far more bills than the Senate so far this year, so I'll be watching to see how many of those the Senate keeps alive. We're talking some major bills related to mandatory minimum prison sentences, public assistance eligibility, and higher education. House and Senate leaders can also move certain bills to what's called the unfinished business calendar to keep them alive, and tax and spending bills aren't subject to the deadline.
Well, as always, we appreciate you, Katarina. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
That's IPR's Katarina Sostarek and Megan McKinney talking about the goings-on at the state capitol. This is Here First from Iowa Public Radio. I'm Michael Leland. Have a great day.